Hey, welcome back to BIBSTE'S Repair Shop. Tonight we reassemble. Probably by playing this tonight to make loud noises on my computer. Excuse me, to reassemble it and hopefully get it ready. We'll slap some. I got some black paint for it. I think some of these would have been black. We're just gonna go with that. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and get it assembled. Talk a little bit about it. It's kind of a half of what's the deal with video because I think I was gonna talk a little bit about how carburetors work. By that I mean I did about 35 seconds of more research than I already had known. And so I thought, well, you know, there's some people. I know I was one for many years that didn't understand exactly how carburetors work. I mean, I knew, like, you put the pieces in them and stuff and how that, but, like, how the actual, what was the science behind them. You know, I heard the terms like Venturi and all that stuff. But I thought, you know, maybe I'll give it a real quick, we'll go through this carb in a real quick way. So I guess this will be, it's not really a full what's the deal with video because we're not going to go in depth on different styles, but we'll, might as well make it, yeah, let's start. So carburetor is basically in the world of everything electronic, it is an analog fuel delivery system, which for a lot of you guys that maybe aren't into gear and stuff, you know, I just say that because, you know, with gears always, you know, everyone's either analog or digital modeling effects and stuff like that. So I thought it'd just be kind of fun. So basically, this is what we would call an updraft style carburetor. And there's two different styles. So updraft style is where the carburetor sits below the intake. So it pulls the fuel up. The air comes in here, grabs fuel, goes up into it. The advantage of an updraft is that you can't like, you know, fill. It's really hard to fill a cylinder full of fuel on an updraft unless you have unless you're pressurizing the fuel system or something dumb, which it really won't, because what would happen is, let me see here, is the fuel will fill up. Like, let's say something's wrong with your float, which we'll get into what that is. If the fuel fills up and overflows it, it'll basically, there's passages that it'll just dump back out. It dump back out instead of going into the engine and like hydrolocking it up. The disadvantage is that with an updraft, you can't. There's a reason why we didn't go to most V8s and automotive applications. Updraft was kind of silly because of the style of what the engine was. You know, you had your intake in the middle, then you put your carburetor on there, and so it sucked through. And I believe, don't quote me, but I think there is some, you know, you're having gravity help you with it versus basically an updraft is fighting gravity. So in some situations where, you know, you could basically have your metering jet just on the side and it pulls through. But yeah, so most older tractors, if you see the carburetor hanging down, it's what they call an updraft. So that's an updraft. So let's get rid of that. We'll start off with the top half of it. We're gonna kind of go through the plan of fuel. So fuel's gonna come in here. It's gonna enter in. And it's got basically, it's a casting with a bunch of passages in it. And it's basically going to come through. You'll see kind of how it's got the bulge. Sorry. Right here. It'll actually cut down over. And it's kind of hard to see. But basically it comes out here where your needle and seat are. So here's your seat. I'm installing this, but this isn't actually what I'm going to use because this is the older one. And then, so what they call the seat. It's basically just a lot of times made out of brass, the brass fitting down there, and then you have a needle, which on this one, I think I lost the other part of that. Fits down in there. And this is basically an automatic shutoff. What you need to do with that is you need a float. And you can usually tell which way they go by which way the wear is. Now, float, when you're replacing, you want to make sure that they float. A lot of times these are made out of brass and they can crack over time and they won't float anymore, and that'll cause problems. So basically what'll happen is, someone's impressive. I know I'm impressed. I hope you all at home are impressed too. And actually, let's see something real quick on the new kit. Yeah, let's just go ahead and call this a what's the deal with. Huh. So that is different than what my Olivers were. My Olivers had a clip on them that holds that in there, but this does not. So you can see that is where that fit. And then there'd be a pin, just right here, that would fit through. And basically what would happen is, when your fuel level is low, the float's kind of stuck there. Hold on a second. Well, that's why I'm replacing that float, because that float gets sticky. Which, with how this thing was running, it was definitely happening. Let's just, for demonstration purposes, get rid of that. So when your float's lower, it's down like this, and this thing will pull out like that, and it allows fuel to bypass it. And then as this thing floats, just like a toilet tank, gets to that top level, it'll close that, and it stops the fuel. If you have this set wrong, like let's say you have it set where it doesn't close it until it's way up here, well, if you can think about what your level of fuel is going to be, it's going to be over your overfill, and it's going to cause it to leak fuel out. So one of the old school tricks, especially not on updraft, but on downdraft carburetors, is if the float's sticking, they go up and hit on them and try and free them up. Because on a downdraft, it'll just pour fuel out, or it won't allow fuel to go in. So that's still a trick you can do, because it'll jostle it free. I go ahead and just take that out, since I will not be using this one. So the fuel then goes into the bowl, what we call it, which is what most of this piece is. So the bowl is this area around here, and this fills with fuel. So this is the amount of fuel that the carburetor has in it. If you ever want to know how much, how much, and if you think, it looks like a lot of area, but you think about this much floating, if it floating this much like that, there's not that much fuel in there, but you can always see how long your tractor will run without it. Just shut your fuel off, fire it up, and it'll run basically until it runs out of fuel. And so your fuel sits in there, and that's how it rests. Now, where the science starts to happen, and where the magic and how they came up with this design back in the day still is pretty cool, is random washer. Should probably figure out what that goes to. We'll figure that out in a minute. Anyway, is how what the fuel does next. So at the very bottom, see if you can see that brass piece way down there at the bottom. See if I can kind of point to it. It's gonna be kind of hard to point to it because I can't, but it's way down in there. See that right there? That's actually your fuel pickup. So what'll happen is, as you're running, I'm gonna put the they don't actually call that, they call this the I mean, it's really I would call it the main jet, but they're actually calling it the what they actually officially call it. They call it the discharge nozzle, because this is how it discharges fuel. So that fits down in there like that, and there's a piece that goes on here that blocks this. So as your air, when you're cranking your engine over, as you guys all would already know, it creates vacuum. So as air is pulled through here, this gets pulled to this little L, like that. Well, as it's doing that, let's get that out of there. Notice how you have this size versus this. And this is what you call your Venturi. And your Venturi is how a carburetor becomes a carburetor. And basically, the science is, I'll actually show you, let me draw it out quick, because I like to, I can just show you this way. Basically, see how this is ramped in, how it's got a curve to it? Geez, I'm bad at showing this. How it's got a curve in there, and then if you look at this other side, you can actually see it a little bit better there, maybe. How it's got a bigger hole here, and then it's a slight curve. So as air is traveling through here, it gets compressed, or it has to funnel down. It's got this big amount of air coming through at a certain speed, and it funnels down. And as it funnels down, it starts to it'll pick up speed. It has to, because it's just like if you got a hose and you put your finger on the end of the hose and it shoots farther because more pressure. It actually creates pressure in here. And as it pulls and it starts to go faster, it'll actually start to pull things along with it, which is how the carburetor totally works. What it'll do is it'll pull. So this thing sticks out right in the middle of that Venturi. Sticks right there. So as this air's coming around here and it's pulling the air and it's starting to speed up, it's going to start pulling fuel, which the fuel will be sitting. There's a little pocket of fuel at the very bottom there. It sits in the bottom of this. See, it's solid right there, so fuel will be sitting around there. It pulls fuel up through these little holes right there, And as it pulls the fuel up through those holes, the fuel comes out. It gets atomized as it's coming out of this nozzle here and mixes in with the incoming air to the engine, and gets burned. Goes through your throttle. And that is basically the travel for most of the fuel. Well, that's under throttle. Now under idle, because you're not going to be making nearly as much vacuum at idle. I mean, you can be, or it won't, but there won't be as much airflow. Then there's a secondary circuit for what they call like the idle air control. That's actually the electronic term. But like on this particular tractor, there's a circuit of passageways where this is actually your idle air adjustment. And what you actually are doing, it's actually an air bleed. So there's, if you see this hole right here, see that hole right there? It just goes straight through there. See if you can kind of see through there. It's hard to see. And that basically puts pressure, air that hasn't gone through this Venturi effect. So it's still like atmospheric air pressure that can run things in the carburetor, we'll say, and use things. So what this does is it meters how much air is allowed through, and the more air that's allowed through, it does the same kind of a thing in a smaller effect. There's a separate jet, which I think I have. I hope I have. Oh, crap, I think it's over here. That actually screws into here and does the same kind of a thing. So it pulls fuel up, but it's a much smaller jet, so it doesn't take as much air flowing to allow that fuel to go through there. And like I said, on these particular carburetors, you're actually adjusting the amount of air. So the less air, the more richer it's going to be, because it's going to pull the same amount of. If it's pulling the same amount of material, the air molecules versus the fuel molecules, if you're pulling, let's say you're pulling 100 molecules, well, when it's 50-50, then it's a 50-50 ratio, which would be extremely rich. Stoichiometric is like 14 to 1, 14.7 to 1. No, it's not. I apologize. That's not right. It's a 12 to 12.7. 12. Yeah. Anyway, that's the idea of pressure. I'm pretty sure I screwed that up. I apologize. And you get in the comments site. Yeah, I've been rambling. But it's going to take, if you're still using that same amount of, you need 100 molecules, if you're putting less air, it's going to use more fuel. So that's what you'll adjust that to kind of correct in your idling. So, and then again, so this piece will go on. You can kind of see how this whole thing works. You can see, it's hard to see now because it's all dark in there, but that main jet sticking right up in there, and then your throttle shaft goes in there. So your throttle will actually go there with your choke on the front. So that's why when you choke these things and you close the air off, it has to pull fuel from everywhere else, which is why when this thing was bad and there was something else plugged up in it, that's what it was doing. So yeah, I guess that kind of turned into what's the deal with. I'm probably going to rebuild this thing off camera because there's like literally four pieces to it. If it did have newer ones, like the not updraft ones, there's something called like an accelerator circuit, where basically as the throttle opens up, it just sprays fuel, extra fuel, above or like right in front of the Venturi to spray it into the mist. Obviously, the older ones didn't have that set up, and there's a lot of newer stuff, but I just thought that was kind of neat, and I always liked to kind of see how that all worked with how basically, there's all sorts of really technical things in tuning and things you can do with the carburetor, and it's technology that's well over 100 years old. And, you can take a finely tuned carburetor and the tuned EFI under the right circumstances will run pretty similar. Now, obviously, EFI is going to have better drivability, but that's a different story for a different time. Anyway, I guess that's what's the deal with, and I'll probably actually bring you back. I'll probably bring you back, and I'll just assemble this thing quick, and we'll talk a little bit. So if you guys keep watching, get a little bonus content. All right, well, so I got done with the 15 minutes of how a carb works. Oh, also, this little thing, this hole right here, basically, if any extra fuel gets up in and pours out, it's a way the fuel can get out. And it also, if there's a backfire with your choke on or something like that, it won't blow your carb apart. So what I'm putting on here is this is just the bowl bleed. So let's say, especially if you're on ethanol fuel and you want to get all that fuel from sitting in there, you can just open this up and it'll drain the fuel out if you want to do that, like before you're going to store it for a long time or something like that. All right. So like I said, I got this kit. I'm going to use some of the parts of it. Some parts I'm not going to use because, well, that's how I roll. Neat. It looks like the same picture that we're looking at. Okay. See, I'm not going to run this throttle shaft because, see, this is brass here, which isn't too bad, but that's plastic. And this one is steel and then brass, so, and you can actually see it's got a little more movement there, so. We'll leave this one in case I got some kind of a problem sometime, but not really too worried about that. All right, let's start with the top hat first. Flip these two around. So, first thing I like to put on is the needle and seat. So when I was talking a lot about how the air that comes in, I mean, it goes in, if you watch how it's metered, it goes into a lot of different passageways to keep the thing from having any problems. I wonder if, what I wonder is, oh, wasn't that one. Got a gasket for that. I swear half this stuff is like, what has a gasket, what doesn't have a gasket. Wow, I really got a lot of good notes here. So, I don't think that actually has a gasket there. We'll find out if it leaks. Negative. Let's put one on there for kicks and giggles. I feel like it would have a gasket. Maybe no, because it's in fuel. And it doesn't look like the old one did. No, you can actually see where those tighten up. I mean, maybe those wire, because that one, the old one did leak some, so maybe that'll be a problem on the new one. But yeah, we'll bring it right back. All right, so I finished it up off camera because there's really nothing exciting about it. So I'm going to tape it all up, paint it all up tonight, and install it tomorrow. We should be making loud noises. Anyway, thanks for watching. Probably gave you guys a bunch of wrong information, so I'd consult Google before I took any of this to an actual bank or any kind of actual information, because as you guys know, I'm kind of an idiot. Like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye. Yeah, I was driving around, and it decided to stop running. Well, it's kept running, but it started running like crap. And I realized I think I had something in the main jet.
Uh-oh.
So.
Did you find any dirt or anything?
Yeah, well, when I first tried to blow through the main jet adjuster thing, it wouldn't want to, it was stuck. So I'm pretty sure there's probably something in there.
Nothing too major then.
No. Just a quick hit. Why can't I open this stupid thing?
I don't know.
And pull. I'm pinching.
Are you pulling?
I'm trying to pull.
Come on.
There we go.
Shake it real good.
Oh, what's that?
Now, why are you painting it black?
A lot of carbs are black. And that way, it's, I mean, I can always paint it red later, but this is primer and paint.
Oh, okay.
So, I figured I have some red, but I wanted to primer at least first.
Gotcha.
It's not, I mean, a lot of carbs on tractors were black, and I'm not.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes they were black. There were certain parts that were supposed to be black on tractors, and certain ones that weren't. Like starters are supposed to be black, mine never are, because I hose the thing off. That's spinning. So I just thought That's where I left all the brass pieces out, so I take them all off, so it should actually really pop.
That way you could actually get in all the nooks and crannies and everything like that.
Yeah. That should be enough. That is so thick. And that should probably be. Oh, jeez. Good enough.